will come true if your mind isn't glued to the fact that life is so blue.
Hi there, it's Sandy and AnaLynne here, and welcome to the Sandy and Friends podcast. Today we're interviewing Christopher Knight. Oh my goodness, how are you today?
I am very well. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintances.
Oh, it's a pleasure to that. Yeah, that.
Well, AnaLynne, I've watched you a little bit preparing for our interview today, and I'm quite impressed. You're very mature for your age, and Sandy, you too.
Oh, thank you. No, he was talking to me. He said my name first. Right? Yes. Okay.
Well, I was going alphabetically.
Oh darn. So, AnaLynne has a lot of questions for you. Yes, I'm the one asking the questions, as always. Yes.
Okay, well then I'll be the one answering them, not as always, because normally, we Brady's were sort of like a group, and when we're in the group, the questions are asked, and you have to fight to be able to answer. But today, I'm all alone, so I get to answer them myself.
You have to fight? That's not how
No, not real Brady kind of fighting. We just have to. There's, if there's 6 of us in a room and a question is answered, we'll all talk over one another. So we've had to learn over the years to sort of hold back. But then if you hold back too much, you never get a word in. It's just like a big family.
That's really funny. Well, now you're with us, just you.
Right. We get to drill down, and I will think hard about answering your question.
Awesome. All right, AnaLynne. How old were you when you started acting?
Very good question. I don't know the answer. Actually, I do know the answer, but I realize now and that I was probably 8, but I grew up thinking I was 7 when I started. But when I do the math and I look at the year, I think it was that I was 8 years old. I think it was 1965. And one of the reasons for that is there's some old photographs that we're taking, and one of them had a date on it. And it was 65, not 64. And if it was 64, I would have been 7. 65, I was 8, or at least later in the year. And I actually believe the photo was 66. That would have been 8. And that was about the time I started. So I had always got the math wrong. Well, I'm going to go with 8. I was 8 years old.
All right, we'll go with 8. But that is extremely young. Oh my goodness. So what was
absolutely. It was frightening. I mean, literally frightening when I got my first job.
What was your first job?
It was a commercial. It was a Purex commercial. But I wasn't trained as an actor. My dad was an actor, but he was on stage at 8. I mean, he did a number of guest starring roles on other television series, but I never joined him in that. So I didn't know anything about what the environment would be like.
Oh.
And the idea of being an actor was really formed by my father. I had a brother at that time who was, 9 if I was 8. He was a year older, 13 months older. And my dad thought, it'd be a great way for us to earn some money to be able then to use for our own education later. And that all he needed to do was introduce us to the entertainment industry through an agent. And we, as little kids, could be actors, because no child really can act. They're just being. So, and ultimately, at the end of the day, that is what acting is. So it wasn't as though at 8 you needed to have any training. So, and he knew that, but I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And lo and behold, after the first interview, I got the job. And I remember showing up for work, which is really interesting too, because that would be a day that I would have normally gone to school, and I didn't have to go to school. I got to go to this park and was dressed in a baseball uniform, and the scene was me running into home plate as a little baseball player, a little leaguer. And that was something that I definitely did in real life. So it was all easy. And I hated going on, well, the interviews at that point, they didn't go on more than one. I would learn to really detest going on interviews. But I loved the work. And um, though I remember distinctly at that time being very nervous about that first day of rolling up. I was a very shy child, so I really didn't know what to expect. And all these adults were going to be looking at me and talking to me, and it worked out well. They handled me. They treated me very nicely, and I grew from there.
Oh, wow. So you were really nervous, but apparently you're natural.
Well, I mean, certainly they did. I didn't speak in any role for a very long time. A number of commercials later would I be asked to say anything, and even then, I had very little experience with dialogue, almost up until the Brady Bunch, and then I would have a lot of dialogue, and it was always difficult for me to get a sentence out like in sequence, because I would look back later as an adult on my life and I had a little ADD. So I had a little hyperactivity, and it seemed like instead of the words coming out one at a time, it was as though the sentence turned sideways and all of the words tried to come out at one time. And so speaking or dealing with dialogue was something that wasn't easy for me or that came natural. But if it didn't require dialogue and it required sliding into home plate, that's really simple, And I guess I learned very early that all acting really is just being in the moment, being. And and ultimately that's what I was hired to play, as myself. And I really couldn't be anybody else. And that worked out well.
Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness. So you learned really young that about getting into the mindset of a character. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, my characters were always very close to me. I wasn't going to play somebody who had an accent. I didn't have those tools or those talents at that time. And as I'm sure you're going to be asking me, I didn't have the tools or talents to sing. So no one was asking me to. I wouldn't get that job.
I've heard about that. What was the process of auditioning for the Brady Bunch?
That is a tough question, Sandy, because there are so many interviews one goes through in this, in the career that I had as a child, and it's so many years ago. Remembering that the Brady Bunch was produced in the pilot in 1968, and the shows from 69 through 74. That is now 54 years ago. 54 years ago. So you're tapping into some very old memories. And even 10 years after, I don't know if I recalled exactly, specifically the interview. Why? Because you go on so many of them and you forget all about them when you go home. I might have been very lucky getting the first interview or audition I went on, but it wouldn't remain like that. I mean, you go to 50 interviews or auditions before getting one. So there's a lot, if you're going to remember them all, to remember. And all I know is that this interview for this thing, it wasn't called the Brady Bunch. I believe it was called the Bradley Brood, but it was a pilot. And I hadn't interviewed for that many pilots at this point, because I'm only now 2 years into the industry, acting mostly in commercials, having trouble speaking in an intelligible fashion. That, I was a little green to still be thinking, I'd get a pilot. Nonetheless, I'd go on interviews, and it just seemed healthier to leave it all behind once leaving, right? I wasn't so tied up in getting the job. I didn't like the interview. I had to drive in. I'd come home from school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, ready with all these plans to play with my friends, and my mom would be dressed up, and I knew what that meant. It meant we were getting in the car and we were driving to go on an interview. And I was a pain in her behind because I complained a lot about that, because it was about an hour with traffic to get into Hollywood to go on the interview, and then another hour in traffic to get home. And sometimes there's a couple of interviews, and that would happen 3 to 4 days a week. I was constantly disappointed in not being able to go out and play with my friends. I should have learned to expect that I shouldn't make plans with my friends. And then you'd go on these interviews, and eventually you'd work, and the work was a lot of fun. It made all the interviews worthwhile. But you don't hang, you don't hang on to the memories of all these interviews. They just fade into the past. But I do remember this, and this is a funny story. My dad loved to go down to Tijuana. We live in Los Angeles, and so Tijuana is 120 miles or so from where we live. For a number of summers, my dad was from New York, from theater, and a Shakespearean actor. They have a festival down in San Diego every year called the Old Globe Festival, where they do Shakespeare in the Park for 2 months. And this particular summer that I recall, I think it was he was starring in Measure for Measure. I don't know Much Ado About Nothing. Probably really doesn't matter. The fact is that we were going to spend our summer down in San Diego, and I would go on interviews, and then we went away to visit with him. He was there all summer, but we went down for 2 weeks for a little vacation. And it turned out that my dad, being in proximity to Tijuana, loved the value that he could, the inexpensiveness of some items down there, like terracotta pots. But we didn't need them necessarily. My dad bought a bunch of pots, and he didn't really think about how he was going to get them home, because he had, at this point, there were 5 of us in the family at this point, and we filled up the car without any pots alone. And so my mom asked, how are you going to get the pots home? How are we going to get home? Well, he realized he's going to have to drive them back in a number of trips. He called home because our aunt was staying at our house to tell her that he'd be coming home early because he had to deliver some pots. And she said, oh, take Chris with you because he has a callback on this show. And I would have missed it if it wasn't for those pots that my dad bought that he had no place for. So I went home with him with the terracotta pots. And I know that story because I remember that was a big family thing, all the pots and but I don't recall the interview per se. I remember there not being, it wasn't as though we had to read lines. It was more or less just sit down and start talking. And I believe it was Sherwood who was in the room. And I can't recall if it was 2 interviews before putting something on tape. And again, that tape was just a personality interview, wasn't like read lines. So they didn't really know, I guess, how hard it was for me to speak. They would soon learn. But Sherwood was most interested in, is he didn't want to have trained actors per se. He wanted just to have kids. And I learned a very valuable lesson that I try to impart on all young talent today. And that is, there are skills that one can learn in this craft of acting early, like singing, which is a discipline, and dancing, and just what is expected of one if one is in theater. But the idea of deep acting is not something I think a child should try to arrive at. They should just try to be themselves, because that is what is going to be hired from, they're going to be hired for themselves, and being as comfortable being you as you can possibly be if you want to be an actor. Leaving you it's not necessary to get that kind of training until later when you're an adult.
All right, so you think that at that age it's just a very natural thing?
It should be. Think of this. Think of what do kids do almost daily, when they're young? They play. What do they play? They play Cowboys and Indians back in my day. They play with dolls. They play with their friends. They almost constantly are in and out of kind of play acting, being themselves. They don't need someone to tell them how to do it. It comes natural. It doesn't come natural for adults. So adults actually have to have all these tools. They have to learn how to, again, be that entity that plays. So I do believe that children, if they're not all gummed up with too much stuff, just can be themselves and play. And adults need a whole lot of training how to play again.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Oh, that's a really interesting take on that. That's pretty wild. Chris, I want to act.
You want to act?
Yes, I do. You think I can do
Well,
it?
yeah, absolutely.
What do you remember about those earlier days on the set? I mean, obviously that whole idea of trying to get into character wasn't a part of that. So, what was it like just generally, being around the kids? How'd you feel?
Well, so we met all, I met the whole cast the first day we showed up to do the pilot. And the pilot was shot about a year before any of the other shows were shot. Because that's the way it works. You do a pilot, then they put it all together, and then the network decides whether or not they want to buy a season of this show for which this is the pilot. Our pilot was when Carol and Mike get married. Fluffy runs and Mike saves the cake, and then it falls on him. So at that point, it wasn't that I knew my castmates. They were brand new. And this is something also you learn early, is that all of a sudden it was a commercial or another job. Probably if I'm playing a kid, more often than not, that came with having parents, somebody playing my mom, someone playing my dad, maybe someone playing a brother or sister. And I learned very quickly to act like they were because that was the job. And you become good at just pretending they're your mom and your dad, or somebody else is your brother and sister. And then you leave that job and they're no longer your mother, father, or brother and sister. So doing the pilot, it was sort of like that. But I never had a job that repeated itself, right? So once I left those people that then played my mom or my dad or my brother and sister, and that was fun day, and I'll never see them again. I remember when the call came in that the pilot had gotten picked up and they were going to go back to work to do the first season. I had met everyone, 9, 8, 10 months earlier. I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. Now they're friends. I know these people. I get to see them again. It's like the way you feel at the end of summer, going back to school, getting to see your friends again. It was this giant smile is what it was. I remember having the feeling, I wish I knew how to do a backflip. That's literally what I thought. I would do a backflip right now if I knew how to, because that's how overjoyed I was at hearing that I was going to go back to work. And mostly because, it was a lot of fun. I liked all those people. Let's play Brady again. Yes, was going through my head. And then, there was a lot more work to be done and a lot more dialogue. And I don't think I was overly concerned about that. I didn't know to be concerned about that. I just knew that it was a fun place to show up to. And then that was the first time we saw the Brady house, right? Because in the pilot, we don't have the Brady house. Oh, right. And, so that whole first couple of months was kind of this new experience of, getting to know everyone again, and now getting to know the character a little bit better, because he would be repeated every day. And then Peter would have to speak, and Peter had a unique style of speaking, because that's how I dealt with the nerves of having to remember my lines. And you can watch it today and watch those first couple of years and see some interesting line readings, because It's just the way my instrument worked at that time. And I laugh at it myself when I watch it.
It seems like you had a lot of fun just going on the set.
Well, they made certain that it was fun. It was really important for Sherwood that the environment was safe, wholesome, and beneficial to all of us. And that's not the way that it normally works in Hollywood. You know, children aren't necessarily the focus. Sometimes they might be, I mean, they're in a plot, but it's not normally about them. In our case, it was. And he wanted to make sure that the environment was healthy for us and fun. We had a lot of work to do, and you know, very few days to get it done in. But he didn't want to take or steal our childhood from us, although a great deal of our childhoods were spent there. He wanted it to be a good place and a happy place for us to show up, and he went to great lengths and was very successful at making it so.
Aw, that's really, I love that.
I do too.
So you guys just grew up on that set. So when you guys renovated that Brady house into making it look like the Brady house, what was it like to see that set made into a house? I mean, that's where you grew up. It was recreated.
Very powerful, because that set doesn't exist anymore, right? That's like, that would be like having one of the members of the family somewhere, but you don't know where, right? Maybe not even sure if they're around, and then you're able to find them or rebuild them or make them part of the family again. It made it whole, and frankly better, because we were on a set. There was one wall that wasn't there, never. You know, when you looked outside the front door, that was still inside. It was inside of a big set, so that wasn't real light coming in the door. That was a plugged in electric lamp light, making it look like that was outside coming in. When we finished building the Brady house, literally looking out the window was looking out at sunlight and sky, and you open the front door and there's a real street there. So it actually became more real than it ever was. And you would forget, or I would, and I know my castmates felt the same way, that we weren't back at Paramount on stage 5 where the set was erected when we were in that house. It felt the same. It felt like we were back home.
Aww.
Quite literally. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Oh, so that was really, yeah, that was like your home for a long time. I mean, yeah, wow.
A fake home, but a home.
Right. Oh, that's so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So, back to when you were a kid.
Okay.
You were very young when you were on the show. So how did you balance school and working on the set?
There are laws here in California whereby if you're going to be a child actor and you're going to be on a show that is during school year, you have to be provided 3 hours of schooling every day on those days that your school is in session. So the way that it worked out is I went to public school, as did I think everybody. So our schedules were at least the same. And they would schedule our summers to begin our shoots. Our new season would start in summertime the Monday after school got out. Because if we weren't in school, we got to work 7 hours a day, each of us. If was it 7 or 8, one of the two, but 1 hour lunch and then 7 hours of work. If we were in school, each of us had to have 3 hours of schooling and only 4 hours of work. So it made it harder to get everything done during the school year. So they took advantage of as much of the summer as they could, where they could get us without having to have school. And when school began, our teacher, well, even over summer, there has to be a representative from the state on the set, and each person or little person, young adult, had to have their parent or guardian with them on the set. You couldn't be there without a parent or guardian. My mom drove with me every day. At some days, my mom acted as Barry's guardian. He was a little bit older, and his mom sometimes was there and sometimes wasn't. But when she wasn't there, she also acted as Barry's guardian. Then there's this person who represents the state to protect all your children, us children, called a welfare worker. And she is the representative of all the children while on the set. If, in other words, the 7 hours is coming up, she lets them know, you can't, you better wrap this up because they got to go in 5 minutes, you know. And so she's our protector, if you will, our state instituted protector. She is also these individuals. We had a wonderful woman who was half Betty White, half George Washington. I mean, or like Martha Washington. Always having projects for us to work on, making sure that there wasn't any time we were capable of being bored to get into trouble. And they're also teachers. So she was accredited to teach children up until 7th grade. And as we were all younger than that, well, Barry was a little bit older than that first year. They had to bring in another teacher for high school for thereafter. So she would be our welfare worker right up to the time the school started, and then she became our teacher. And another teacher would come in and help with being the teacher for Barry first, then Maureen and Barry, and me and Barry and Maureen, because we all got to a place where our education outstripped our welfare workers' initial accreditation. And it's kind of crazy, but you would go to school between scenes. And sometimes, like, they have to set up the lights, right? So that could take 45 minutes. And, you know, so when they're setting up the lights, they have stand-ins standing there so they can light them. And we would go to school. Well, sometimes it would take 10 minutes to light up the lights, maybe 5 minutes, and they'd send us to school and then come back and rip us out. Send us to school. We came to the conclusion you can't learn anything in less than 20 minutes. So if you're going to send us to school, it's got to be a 20-minute period. No sense sending us there if it's not going to be 20 minutes. They got very good at making sure that we were there for 20-minute blocks. And you would think that that would be a very disruptive way of studying. But because there's so few of us, you know, we have one teacher for, 2 teachers for 6. Actually, one teacher for 5 of us. That's a lot more supervision than we would have had at our regular school. That it worked out pretty well. And we then also found out that if you were the star of the show, you might not be able to get all your schooling because you were working in front of that camera so much. So we came to an agreement that what we would do, we would know when it was an episode that starred Marcia or Maureen, and that Maureen was going to be, it was going to be hard for Maureen in those days that this show coming up was filming to get enough schooling. So she banked it in advance. So what we did is those days when you weren't in front of the camera a lot because it wasn't an episode about you, instead of just going for 3 hours, you'd go for 6 and bank an extra 3 hours of school. So though sometimes we got shortchanged, much of the time we were over banking and making certain there was extra schooling in the bank so that we could slip some days, you know, less than 3 hours of schooling. But as you can see, there was a lot of adult supervision, and it's a very professional environment where, though we had fun, it was work, and there's a lot of expense. There's 3 different main periods of production when you're working on television or a feature film. There's pre-production. That's all the stuff goes on before you get the cameras rolling on your cast. That's where you write your scripts, you edit your scripts, you plan your locations and plan your whole schedule. And then there's principal photography. That's what they call it when you're in front of the cameras. And that's when we're working, right? We're in front of the cameras. We're not involved in any of the pre-production stuff. And then after you're done, it goes into post-production, and post-production is whereby they put the music and they edit it all together, and they put the titles in, and they finally package it and create the final product. And you're not involved in that either. So you're just involved in this principal photography. The most expensive time in this, because television production is expensive, is in the principal photography. So, though we were having fun, that was the time all the money was being spent. You couldn't have too much fun because it was work.
Oh my goodness, that sounds like a whole lot. And how old were you when all this was happening? Like 8?
Well, that would have been 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Let's see. It was it was 8 when we did, no, 10 when we did the pilot. What am I saying? And then 11, 12, 11 through just about 16.
It was close.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You handled all that. Oh my goodness.
Like I said, there was a lot of adult supervision. If I was at home, I wouldn't have had my mom over my shoulder all the time. And I probably needed as many adults around me as there were. And if I didn't have them, I might not be the person I am today. I don't know. I just think, I am, but I'm also sad for my brother and sister who were quite a bit younger than me, that they didn't have their mom at home.
Aw, so what was it like being around your peers, and did they all refer to you as Peter Brady? I mean,
It was, I wish I could say it was great, but it was awful. Why? Because, when you're 14, I know you have some familiarity with this, Sandy. I don't know, AnaLynne, how old you are, but I would imagine this goes for you too. Your peers or friends at that age can be kind of cruel to people who are different. And when you're on a television show, you're kind of different. And all you want to do is fit in and have friends. And all of a sudden you're standing out, and that's causing some people to think that you need to be ridiculed. So there's a lot of teasing that went on in school. And no one prepares you for it, because one day you're just a kid that goes to school, and the next day they're watching you on television, and you're in their mind, like, what is this crazy television star, and you're got a fat head or a big head, and you don't have any of that, but they think that you might, so they have to make sure that you don't develop one. So it can be, but then it just takes more time to develop friendships, because people have maybe the wrong idea of who you are, and you have to, just persevere. And ultimately, in the day, you end up with a lot more friends, because, if you're Brady, it's as though you're a member of everyone's family.
that is so sweet. I understand that whole thing, though. I mean, when she brings me to school, her peers don't like me very much. I'm a bit, smaller.
Yeah. Well, don't listen to them. What I did is everybody who teased me, I made friends with.
Aw. Well, I'm glad that you were able to persevere and figure that out so young. That's pretty cool.
Well, I am too.
So, was there anybody that you were especially close with on the set?
Well, we had a wonderful set, and there was so many, I was right in the middle too. I had Barry at one end, I had, one side, I got Michael at the other. And so I loved hanging out with Mike, because I could be an older brother. I had an older brother. I didn't, I had a younger brother, but he was so much younger, and he was at home. He was like 3 at this point. Michael was like my little henchman, right? And Barry was he always thought of himself as one of the adults. So he kind of, thought of himself as a big man and not a kid. But we all of us, maybe me being the ringleader, loved teasing Maureen, because she was really easy to tease. And I have a playful personality that sometimes can go too far. So I would tease her a lot. And we were like brother and sister. Maureen's mom couldn't drive. but she lived close to us. So we picked them up and drove them in every day. And as I said before, going to interviews is the same as going to the set. It took an hour to get there, an hour to get home. That gave me an extra hour, or that gave me an extra 2 hours every day with Maureen, just chatting about this or talking about that. So we became like brother and sister. And I don't know if you have brothers and sisters, but I had them. I had Brady brothers and sisters. I teased them all, and they teased me, and that's just the way it worked.
Aw,
All in
wow.
good nature.
Oh, I'm sure. You guys really became like family. I love that.
And are to this day.
Aw, really? Oh, you keep in contact?
We do. I was just on a Zoom session with Barry this morning.
Oh, really? How was
We are doing a podcast where and actually it just premiered this morning, the podcast called The Real Brady Bros, where Barry and I review Brady episodes. We talk about them. We talk about our individual experiences in shooting them, and we watch the episodes, which might be the first time watching it in 40 years, and then discuss that particular episode as part of that podcast. It's a great deal of fun.
That is so cool.
Look for it.
I'm already a fan, and I haven't even seen it.
Well, you don't have to wait. They're available for download anywhere you can find podcasts.
Awesome. Well, I'll be watching. That is really cool. So do you have a favorite episode of the show?
I do. But our favorite episodes, because everybody's is the same, are the Hawaii episodes because of the experience in doing the episode. Not necessarily from watching them, and that's what our audience, they have a favorite episodes because of the something that drew them to a particular episode. Some episode was particularly funny for them, or truthful to them, or rang a particular chord for them. But for us, it was Hawaii, because we got to go to Hawaii, and that's very special if you've not been. So Hawaii is a very, very magical place. And so, when asked that question, my favorite episodes were the Hawaii episodes. And the girls were much luckier than boys, because the boys had more work to do. The girls had more time off. They got to enjoy Hawaii. But it was still better than working on the set.
Oh, well, what was it like what is it like to film outside of the set, actually?
What's interesting is it takes longer when you're on location to get anything done. There's a lot of things one learns when one gets in this that one couldn't have possibly anticipated. Like when you're outside, you got to wait for planes because it screws up the audio.
Oh.
You have so many different pieces that are being put together. You do a scene with the cameras way back out, call it a master shot, and they get all the action from that. And then they go in with the cameras to get close-ups, but we're only dealing with one camera. So the one camera goes in for a 2-shot of Greg and Peter over here. And then another camera comes in over here and gets Carol and Mike. And then there's another shot of Jan over here. And so every one of those is a different setup. Now, in every one of those, you're repeating the same lines. So if a plane flies over on one of those and there's a plane in it, and then you cut to Greg and Peter talking when there wasn't a plane in their shot, it's not going to match up. So they got to wait for the audio to be clear. And it's amazing how many planes or sirens or other things outside happen that you're not in control of. So you have to be a lot more patient. And also they have to worry about the light and how it's getting to be dark, and now you can't, this is a daytime shot, so yeah, it's a lot more critical, takes a lot more time, but it's a lot more fun being outside. And also when we were outside, we were interacting with those individuals who happened to be there, which kind of like were our fans. And we've never experienced, well, other than being at the Grand Canyon, doing that before, because we were always inside a set.
Oh, well, that's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. How did it feel getting to meet so many different, I guess, celebrities? You had a lot of really cool guest stars on the show, like Joe Namath, Desi Arnaz Jr., Davy Jones. So what was that like?
it was an incredible privilege. Um, but a lot of times it ultimately worked out that it was just saying, "Hi, Mr. Arnez, I'm a big fan."
Oh,
Because if you weren't in the scene acting with him back and forth, you didn't get to spend a whole lot of time with Desi Arnaz. Maureen did, um, but like I would be in school, but I certainly got to meet Desi Arnaz or Davy Jones. But most of those episodes with those stars, it wasn't as though I was hanging out a lot, um, getting to know them, but it was a privilege to be able to meet all the wonderful people that we did have on the show.
oh, that is so cool. I thought they were so honored to meet you.
Well, I'm looking back and hoping that was so.
What was it like getting to do the Brady Kids?
Well, it was well, interesting, because how do you say this? So here we are, popular, and now because we're on a television show, we should now start recording albums. I guess makes sense if you're somebody in a room watching these kids and saying, now, everybody else is saying, we got the Jackson Five, we got the Osmonds, you got the Franco family, later be Rick Springfield. I mean, you got these people from television who have audience, and let's now record them. You have to have talent to sing. I mean, you have to have a desire to learn it. Or I had no music in my family. I thought it was really ironic that my mom thought this was a good idea, thinking we don't have a piano. I mean, at some point she tried to have me take guitar lessons, but as it turns out, I have absolutely no talent in that area. I'm arrhythmic and tone deaf. And you got to start off with some innate ability, to want to be there, feel comfortable there. I mean, I can't feel comfortable going in and having fun at a karaoke bar because I'm so pitiful at singing. So it's not a place for me to be, not for others who need to work with me, and certainly not for me. So it was a bad idea for me. As good an idea as it might have been in the abstract, it was no fun. Put it this way. Do you like sports? No. So I mean, like, maybe somebody in your family forces you to play baseball. I mean, if you don't want to do it and you're no good at it, it's a nightmare. So that would be me. I was like, being required to do something because I was part of a group, but I really had no business being there.
Oh,
So
good.
then when they did the episode with my voice cracking, I thought they were pointing it out. I thought they were making fun of me.
Was that the intent?
No, it wasn't. But that week that we did that show was the lowest point of my Brady career. I was really dark. It was sad. I thought everybody's making fun of me. They had no idea that that's the way I was thinking, but they thought it was cute that I had to have my voice cracked.
Well, go back and try and tell younger you that we love you.
Oh, thank you. And I love me too. And I let that not, I just think that it's important to note that you don't have to do everything. Do the things you love to do. Perfect those. I mean, it's not, there's some things you're just going to be good at, and no matter how much training you get, you're not going to be better at it. And if you don't enjoy it, why spend your time endeavoring there? A lot of people want to sing that can't, but because it's important to them that they learn to some degree, they'll spend time and energy on learning how, and maybe eventually they'll break through. But it's not an area that I was that dedicated to. I didn't miss it. I knew where my talents lied. It wasn't there. You don't even want me singing happy birthday. Okay.
All right. So do you have a lot of the Brady virtue still in you?
I do. I appreciate it. immensely. And I would have never had an appreciation for it if I hadn't gone through the experience of being a Brady that I have, and being reminded of its virtue. And that's, and the, again, I'll use the word privilege, but that's what it is. I don't want to overuse it. The privilege of being in this position. I think it was initially pointed out, perhaps by example, by Florence. So she literally made clear to us how much of a privilege it was to have fans, how to treat them, and then she provided an example. And being a Brady is a weird place because it's like your childhood, but one has to get beyond being recognized for something they did as a child and recognize what it does to those people who remember it. They remember you like you're a member of their family and let you in like you're a member of the family. And though you're not, that's an important place that we have been delivered to. And we are aspirational as a family in part because the Bradys are so good, but there's nothing wrong with aspiration. I didn't have a family like the Bradys. So I have the other that, you know, I'd rather have something like the Bradys, and or if I don't have it, try to get it, whatever I've got, closer to being like the Bradys, because at the end of the day, it's about respect and it's about love and it's about kindness, and those are all virtues one can't have too much of.
Right, exactly. You know what? I think everybody in the whole world should watch the Brady Bunch.
And they do. Well, it's probably everybody in the world has.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not everybody, but I mean, I think it's been dubbed into 8 different languages, and it plays worldwide. So certainly there's places that it's never played, but there's very many that were well known.
I think it really says something. I mean, the fact that it's just one of the, it just continues to come back and kids my age watch it. It's just the sweetest show. And I love that it's still so well known. It's really great.
It's about family, and we all have one of some sort, and we're all trying to find our place in that family. And that's what the Brady's is about. It's just that first community that you're born into, wanting it to be a happy, hopeful place.
Oh, I love that. Well, we have one last question for you.
Okay.
AnaLynne, you can ask it. All right. What are you up to now? What projects are you working on? Let's hear.
I am working on the podcast with Barry. I got that going on. I have my other businesses. I was removed from the entertainment industry for 20 some odd years as I went into the high tech arena, and I worked in this computer and hardware of computers back in the 80s, 90s, and that gave me the experience of being in business, and I love being in business. So I have another business that right now, which is the brand of Christopher Knight Home, or Christopher Knight Brands, where I the brand of furniture sold online at Amazon, at Overstock.com, and at Target.com, and it's grown into quite a big business. So I handled that, and I'm always a Brady, always will be a Brady, and there's always discussions, something Brady in the wind. So who knows if in the future there'll be another incarnation. Happy being Peter, because he's very similar to me.
That is so cool. Oh my goodness. I love how much you embrace the Brady Bunch. I love that.
Yeah, it's too hard. It's everywhere. So how do you run from, like running from the wind? You're not gonna. It's always gonna be there. So enjoy it.
Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with us. This has been
You're
an
very
absolute honor. Oh my goodness. I can't
The
believe
pleasure,
it.
it was all mine, AnaLynne. The honor was all mine. You've been wonderful. I only ask that you grow up to be as wonderful as adults as you are there today. Both you, Sandy, and AnaLynne. We need creative, respectful, hopeful generations in our future. So I look forward to following your career, Sandy, and your life, AnaLynne, from here on out.
You don't listen to her. You should be watching me. Just me. I'm the creative one here. Right.
I have a feeling that the team is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Everyone needs someone.
Sure. Yeah. All right.
All right. And next time you'll say that, and I'll believe you mean it.
Oh, this has been so much fun. You're the best. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
No, Sandy, it's my pleasure, and good luck in your future endeavors. I am a fan now.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. I've been watching you since I was like this big. So
Certainly, I know. We'll keep watching.
oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And
You're very
to
welcome.
everyone out there watching, you should go follow Chris.
Go download one of or we only have one episode up there right now because it just again premiered last night. Go listen to The Real Brady Bros. It's on iTunes, it's Apple, wherever podcasts are downloadable. Go there and look for The Real Brady Bros. And tell me what you think.
I'm so excited to listen. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, thank you so much. Bye.
You're very welcome. Bye now.
Beyond the clouds and the rain, a place where your sadness drains, where the sun peers over your sadness and your pain. There is no gravity, yet within this cavity you make your own truth. Your dreams will come true if your mind isn't glued to the fact that life is so blue. Your dreams cannot stay if you don't repay yourself for making it through. The path to making your dreams come true. Alrighty, we'll see you next time. AnaLynne, what's for dinner? Pork chops and applesauce. Well, ain't that swell. Hey, have you got something caught between your teeth?